Hi, everybody. My name is Tom Chesterton. I'm co-founder and chief exec of Tonic.
Hi, I'm Mark Hawley. I'm Chief Creative Officer and also co-founder of Tonic.
Thanks very much for spending some time with us today. We're going to give you a little bit of our thinking around employer brand and what that means right now and how organizations can use this powerful business tool to make a real difference to how their people feel about them. What we're going to focus on is how not to become bland in your branding. And we're going to begin by giving you our perspective on the world. What we wanted to kind of begin with, though, was just to go back to brass tacks. So we've spent quite a lot of the last 8 years working with organizations to build their talent brands to a place where people want to work with them. So that gives us quite a lot of insight in terms of, what can go well and what can go less well. But in terms of speaking together, Mark and I don't really get to do that very often. I think the last time we did it was about 12 months ago. So what we definitely didn't want to do was to give you your usual agency presentation. You've probably seen quite a lot of those in the past. You're probably seeing quite a lot today. And in fairness, we've probably delivered quite a lot of those presentations. So we wanted to kind of steer away from that. And we wanted to do that because the usual agency presentation begins with some vaguely interesting research. And the only thing that could really focus on right now is this current environment of the pandemic. And what we didn't want to give you was 5 things that employer branding could learn from COVID-19. That didn't seem very good, but also it didn't seem like there was an awful lot we could learn from that. So we didn't want to take some vague research, extrapolate some thought, and show you a case study which really had nothing to do with it. That didn't seem to be very good in terms of value add. And we certainly didn't want to sell you the agency. Obviously, if we do a good job here and you like our thinking or you like the way we think, then we'd love to chat with you. But we didn't want to give you your usual agency presentation because, frankly, it's a little bit dull, a bit boring, and we think we could do an awful lot better.
So today we're going to kind of present an idea which is could be seen as a little bit controversial, especially in the current climate of organisations and brands working so hard to show you what they're doing for their people and their colleagues and their candidates and so on. But we've got a concern that not everybody cares as much about employer brand as you might do. So if you can imagine we were all in a room and I asked you to stand up and I asked you to stand up if you cared about employer brand, of course you would all stand up because you're all avid fans of employer branding and talent acquisition. However, if I then asked you how many outside of employer brand in your organisation really cares about it, and to sit down if you felt that people didn't particularly care about it, I would imagine that a lot of you would sit down. And as Tom said, 12 months ago, we did something very similar, and there were 750 people. They all stood up, and then about 650 people all sat down when I asked the second question. So we've got a pretty good idea that employer brand is starting to become a little bit boring. Why? Because we're all doing the same. And we're all suggesting the same things. There's no clear space. And the most fundamental issue with this is that there isn't really a point of view. So because people see it as it's boring. And people are looking at it and we're all concerned about the same things. And people don't care when it's bland. We have to have a point of view. So there, we said it. We've said something that I never thought we would ever say again, apart from the one time last year. I never thought we'd say it again, that employer brand is boring, but it shouldn't be, because now more than ever, employer brand is important. And it's one of those, it's one of the business tools that will allow us as organisations to really move forward. So when people tell you the 5 things that you need to build your employer brand on, I'm sure you've seen them because they pepper LinkedIn. They're even on there today, I've checked. It's dull. And it's not the 5 things you need to know. What you need to know is, what's your point of view and what do you stand for and why should people believe that? It's not about your logo and the size of your logo or the position of your logo. And even having that argument with marketing that says, let's make it a little bit bigger. It's not even about the carefully selected color palette that nobody really cares about. Do you think anybody sitting while looking at your content knows that that's not quite the shade of blue that you've chosen? They don't care. What they're looking for is they're looking for a point of view and they're looking for a belief that they can stand behind. And the work that we do with organizations is all around helping them understand their belief, helping them understand what they stand for, and helping them understand what their point of view is and why that matters to the market, because we see so many brands that come together that say they're human. Of course they're all human, of course they all want to be honest, and of course they all want to be clear. That creates a bland sweet spot where everybody sits. So how do you create that clear space with your own point of view? And what we do is we then look at that against every other organisation in your market, in your sector, and outside of your sector. And frankly, everybody else is all saying they want to be honest, human, and clear. So there's every other brand out there saying exactly the same thing, an employer brand. And Vicky Ross and Paul Mellor of Mellor and Smith put this together, and it's a great illustration of exactly what we think. Because unless we start to really behave in a different way, we start to create a point of view and be steadfast behind that. Why should people necessarily believe who we are? And then you start thinking about those conversations you have with marketing, because they say that the brand is theirs and it's not anybody else's. But you say, well, actually, it's mine, because you know, it's about people. And we've got now this convergence of HR and marketing all saying it's mine, it's mine, it's mine. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of Nemo and those wonderful seagulls, where we're all saying mine, but actually who's owning it? Who's owning this point of view? And we believe that actually it doesn't matter. Marketing can own it, you can own it, but fundamentally your people own it. And that's the fundamental truth. Your people are your employer brand, and the candidates that you're trying to attract, the people you're trying to attract, will believe the people who believe in your point of view and where you're going as an organisation. Because every organisation is saying work here, it's good. And that's absolutely fine. Work here, it's good is what we're all saying. But we should all be saying something that people care about, because no one cares about your colours, your logos, the reasons to come and join us. But what they will want to hear is what they should care about, why they should come and join you beyond the functional, fundamental reasons of any role in any organisation. Why should they believe your point of view? And does that align with the way that what they believe and their values as an individual? Because until you have that, nobody's going to care, and it's going to become bland. So you need to create a point of view.
So what you need to become is the CEO of having a point of view, but equally you need to be conscious about what the business is thinking and saying. And PwC usefully do an annual survey of chief execs, so we get a clear idea about what actually is bothering them from a business perspective. And it'll be fascinating to see what that looks like in December of this year when they roll out the next version. But in the last iteration of that survey was the first time that chief execs stopped talking about sales and product as being the most important differentiator about what their business stands for, and started talking about people and purpose in the same breath. So that gives us a clue about, if we're going to talk about something from a point of view perspective, what that should be about, perhaps. And I'm sure that lots of organizations have talked to you about purpose. And so much so that purpose almost has that danger of falling into the same breath as authenticity, which is it becomes another piece of marketing jargon where everybody wants to have purpose. And if purpose and if authenticity talked about in the same way, then that means we're not being real. We're not talking about our purpose and the thing that drives us in the right way, because we're not connecting it with the people who we want to talk to. So what is this point of view we're talking about? What is this articulation of our purpose that really gives something for people to hang on to? And if that point of view is articulated correctly, then your people have something to truly stand behind and believe in, because they'll see what your organization stands for, how they have to behave, and why other people should want to come and be part of that. It's probably the most powerful brand promise that you can actually make as an organization, both to your customers and to your people, not least of which in this environment, because lots of organizations are starting to see the power of how we communicate in a way that's compelling to drive engagement and advocacy. And that clearly comes from a place where we're all working as one, through consumer, through employer, and through stakeholder branding. You think about some of the things that are out there at the moment from a conversation perspective: Black Lives Matter, Pride, which is happening and has happened over the last couple of weeks. So obviously the pandemic we're in and what that means to change people's working and living arrangements, and even the Me Too movement that happened a couple of years ago. These are things that have joined people together in a way that issues and initiatives haven't managed to before. And organizations are unable to duck that as something that's too difficult or too controversial to embrace in the past. You know, that sense of conservatism about what a brand can and cannot be, you know, it doesn't apply anymore. And the same is true from an employer brand perspective. Your people expect you to have a view and to take a position. You know, you can't hide anymore and pretend these things are going to go away. An employer brand needs to grab this with two hands and run with it as something that they can do to generate their own sense of differentiation in their markets, where employer branding can have real power. You know, your people want you to have a view too, and if you think about what that means about being relevant to what their real lived life is. It means being honest about what's happening in the world and what your organization is doing about it. It means giving value to them, so being helpful to them rather than being just the purveyor of information, because information on its own is what? It's just more noise for them to ignore in their social media stream. You have to think about the whole employee experience. So employer brand cannot just be in a box where recruitment and talent acquisition lives. It has to be about the whole experience of people as they go through the recruitment process, through onboarding into the place where, you know, they're living their life as one of your employees. If you get that right, you know, our view is that if you're fast out of the blocks and you spend a bit of time listening to what people are saying, you then provide real, relevant and added value content, you give people a perspective that creates a positive environment, creates a positive mood, and gives people hope for the future. And let's not forget that people are living in the moment with a great deal of uncertainty and a great lack of clarity about what their futures are like. And those organizations that get that right will really benefit from that action that they take. They'll drive preference from the brand perspective, and they'll drive loyalty long into the future. Now, is that brave? Of course it is, but at the same time, it's probably the thing that our consumers of information are expecting from us right now. We can't be hidden behind the corporate line anymore. That doesn't wash. If you think about some of the brands that are succeeding right now, that's not what they're doing. They're out there on the front foot telling what they think. They're getting beyond the sense of, we're going to tell you what it's like to be here. You know, they're getting beyond the sense of, here's some functional stuff that we're going to give you. They're getting beyond the give and the get, if you like. They're getting into some of the emotion that brings. So that sense of admiration in the wider community at the top end of the funnel, and they're getting into the place where they're changing how people feel about them as they move through that broader employee experience. You know, the old adage of people will forget what you say, forget what you do, but they'll never forget how you feel has never been more true than it is right now. And our job as employer branders, rather than employer blanders, is to get that right and make sure people feel amazing, or as amazing as we can make them. So there's some things you've got to stop doing, some things you've got to ask yourself, and some things you've got to think about. The first thing we think you should do is to stop talking aimlessly about yourself. People will not listen to you if you talk about the things that you think are important, but aren't necessarily, you know, where their mindsets are at. You've got to start thinking about being more out there and being anything but dull and bland. You know, you've got to stop thinking about what experts say and start thinking about what your organization stands for. And employer brand is now ready to get out of the box to start being a proper business tool.
So it's about asking yourself, really, what do you and what does your organisation stand for? What is it you want to tell the world around your point of view that is believable, that is understandable, and that you can stand behind and be steadfast behind? And when you've got that, you're then able to say, you know, does this serve my organisation and me? Does it present the organisation in the way that is true and the way and what we all believe? Is it something that the candidate is going to be interested in? The reader is going to take to heart and say, do you know, this is an organisation beyond the function, beyond the emotion, that makes me feel like I want to be a part of that organisation. It makes me feel like that I can do something of value, of purpose, and of some good. Because today in this market and in the next year or two, or even 3 years, the individuals are going to be asking themselves and of their employers, what can I do that's going to allow me to do some good in the world? You know, we've seen charity environments come up quickly. We've seen help groups come up quickly. We've seen organisations that have sprung out of nowhere, helping communities, and that sense of this is the first time in many years that people have actually really started to ask somebody, how are you? And I think that's what we need to ask ourselves and create a point of view and an organisation through our employer brand that says, this is who we are, this is why we're here, this is what you can do to help us do some good.
So the key challenge with all of this is, where do you start? So the first thing we want you to think about is, okay, which battle is going to have the biggest impact on my business? Which battle is going to have the biggest impact on the people who currently work for my organisation? When you've decided what that is, absolutely get involved and own the conversation, own the relationship. Make sure you're delivering value to people, of course, but make sure that the business need is aligned to that too. So, while you're being tenacious and steadfast and sticking to your guns, make sure you've got value to the business at the heart of what you do. So to that point, there are three things we think that any organisation should be doing right now. Certainly we're talking to our clients about, what does this mean? So the first thing is, as recruiting drops down the agenda, and it may be some time before it comes back, we've got to think about what it is we can do to make people feel better as they're employed by us. So we've got to make our employer brand work inside the business first, make sure the employee experience is exactly where it should be, but then take what's special about your business on the inside and make it really clear outside too. So we call that taking the inside out, being inside out. But really that's about talking about your culture and talking about the things that make your organization great. And the last thing is, don't go quiet, whatever you do. The point about people having too much information but almost no information has never been more true. So, in the scrolling of 93 meters that people scroll every day, there's so much content, but not a lot of it is very helpful. What people need is information that's going to allow them to make better decisions and feel more comfortable in what they're doing. And we can all help that from an employer brand perspective, because there are people, we're people communicators at the end of the day. So if we're going quiet, we're underserving them. So our final bit of advice would be confident, be brave, and be bold, and don't go quiet.
So we started this conversation with something controversial, that we said it was boring, that it was bland, I think really what we're saying is that now is the opportunity to build a point of view and build a reason and something you can stand behind that is true to your business and true to your organisation. And we all have a responsibility to that. We shouldn't be bland. Every one of our organisations is unique. Every one of our organisations is different. Every one of our people that we work with and that could potentially come to us are unique in themselves. What will unite us is a purpose that we can truly believe, and that isn't the new authentic, that's real, that's honest, and that we can all stand behind, and that is enduring. We've talked about not being schizophrenic. We've talked about being agile, but the worst thing to be is forgotten. So as employer brand specialists, as talent acquisition specialists, we have that responsibility to continue to make employer branding brilliant. And when marketing come along and say it's the wrong blue, that's fine, let them have it. So thank you very much for listening to us. We've loved the last 15 or so minutes. We're not two actors, but we were called the two Ronnies at one point in our life, I think. So, but thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to seeing you for real soon at one of the summits.
Thanks very much, everybody.